Well, joining us now on the line, we have legal expert Paul Ngobeni to talk to us about this particular case. Mr. Ngobeni, thank you so very much for joining us on Afro Breakfast.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me on your show.
Well, we had a conversation with AfriForum, who brought this case forward and pushed for it, and they told us, and what we've heard, of course, in news reports, is that the state had decided initially not to prosecute. What reasons had the state given for not prosecuting, and is that something that, is regular, I suppose, when it comes to criminal matters?
Well, there's nothing unusual about it. A prosecutor makes the initial assessment of whether or not he can prove his case beyond reasonable doubt at trial. Then he might decide, based on the weakness in the evidence, to not proceed with a case. In a case where you're talking about an automobile accident, for instance, where persons were injured, some died, and there probably were no other eyewitnesses other than the passengers and so forth. It's not unusual for a prosecutor to entertain some doubts as to whether or not he can actually prove his case beyond reasonable doubt at trial, which is a high standard, beyond reasonable doubt.
Yes. Now, what elements must be present when someone is accused of a culpable homicide? Obviously, someone must have died. It must have been, I suppose, an accident. But what are the main factors or elements that should be there that comprises a culpable homicide that perhaps were not present in this particular case?
In a layman's term, it simply means that someone was careless. Through someone's carelessness, an accident was caused, and which resulted in the death of another human being.
Yes.
But the question of carelessness is not the same as a civil standard of being careless. There is a heightened standard there. That means the person's carelessness must rise to the criminal level.
Yeah. Now,
the other thing that might sometimes, when we deal with automobile cases, that might actually persuade a prosecutor to look at a case differently, is that the victims are not entirely without recourse. They can sue the person in a court and recover damages for the death and so forth. So, given that we are dealing with negligence, that is negligent homicide, basically.
Yes.
That might actually have been one of the factors. I was not privy to the decision making, of course, but I'm saying that's one of the factors that the prosecutor might take into account in deciding whether to deploy his resources into prosecuting a case where there may be other recourse for the victims.
Now, Mr. Ngobeni, you talk about, the issue of carelessness. Of course, we've used layman's terms here. You say that there should have been a negligent homicide, so to speak. From where you're standing, do you think this is what happened in this particular case? Can we compare it, for instance, to the very highly publicized case of the musician Jub Jub, where he knocked down some children on the side of the road, and it was found that he had been intoxicated and so forth? Was there an element of carelessness in this particular case involving Duduzane Zuma? What do we know about the merits of this?
Yeah, we don't know much about the merits of it. And in fact, the fact that there was no... See, it's a good, you raise a very good example with the Jub Jub case, where there was allegations of drag racing, that he was involved in drag racing, which itself will be an offense, and that he was under the influence of drugs or alcohol. In this case, in the Duduzane Zuma's case, none of those elements were present. The only thing that we know is that he was driving a vehicle which collided with a taxi that was carrying passengers, and unfortunately, two of those passengers died.
Yes.
In other words, we have not been told anything else beyond the fact that two vehicles collided, and one of the drivers of that vehicle was Duduzane Zuma, and it was what has been determined through an inquest that there is, quote, prima facie evidence that he might have been negligent.
All right.
But
Just to interrupt you there, we are bringing you live visuals there. As you can see, if you're looking at your screen, just to our viewers there, those are live visuals. Duduzane Zuma is in court. You can see there. I do believe he's talking to his legal team. He was earlier talking to, as I believe, my former SABC colleague there, Griselda Lewis there, having a very long conversation. I saw our own reporter, Cindy Suetwala, walking into the court as well, sitting there in the front row. So those are those live visuals that you're watching there at the moment. Just bringing you back in, Mr. Ngobeni. Right, so we understand that AfriForum brought back this case after the state had decided not to prosecute. Can you tell us about the merits around that and sort of the rights of an organization like AfriForum, a lobby group like AfriForum, to have what I believe is being called a private prosecution? What is that?
Well, normally, just very briefly, if the state declines to prosecute a criminal matter, interested persons might request that the state issue a nolle prosequi, which is basically a document indicating its decision not to prosecute. Then the private party, provided they have an interest in the matter, provided they are affected, for instance, if it's a victim who is directly affected by the alleged criminal offense, they then will have a right to institute a criminal prosecution.
All right.
Well, basically do the work that the state prosecutor would have done if the state had not decided to drop the case, so to speak.
All right, Mr. Ngobeni, thank you so very much. I wish I had more time. We do appreciate you being on the show. All right, I think that's where we leave it then. No doubt Cindy will continue on her show to dip in and out of that case. He is in court at the moment. Session hasn't begun as yet, but certainly one of our main stories then for today. And Cindy Mabe will be having, I suppose, in-depth conversations on what's unfolding in court there. And, of course, our reporter, you did see, it's a very busy day in court there. Cindy Suetwala will also be crossing in and out. Do stay tuned to Afro World.